Hi everyone, thank you for coming to today's webinar. If Grace, if you mind just going to the next slide so I can just do some intros to everyone.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So thanks for coming everyone today. So before we start, everyone, you're all muted for now, but you are able to type in the chat or questions. We will open up mics if needed during the questions section if you like, but otherwise feel free to put anything you want to say in the chat or questions boxes. I'm Laura Wright. I'm a HR consultant at Kingswood Group. I support businesses of different sizes from a variety of different industries with their HR needs. I wasn't always in HR, so I first had a career in leadership and management, so fully understand challenges businesses face at the moment, navigating this new world, trying to retain happy and engaged workforce is not always easy. Hopefully today's webinar will help you gain insight into how this can be achieved by learning more about what workers want. So before I hand over to Nate, I also want to introduce you to Grace, who is our HR coordinator and helping making sure that this webinar runs smoothly. Do you want to say hi, Grace?
Everyone. Yeah. Hello. I'll just be keeping an eye on the chat box and also any questions that come through. But yeah, lovely to see you all today.
Okay, and last but not least, Nate Harwood is the CEO for New Possible. So Nate, if you wouldn't mind just introing yourself as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Laura. So New Possible. My background's in consumer insight. One thing I noticed in consumer insight is almost everything ties back to culture and ultimately people. And from that, we launched New Possible November 2021. We're primarily employee survey and insight platform. We're sector agnostic, so we capture feedback across hospitality, engineering, financial services, and a real range of firm sizes too, from 10 people to right up to 20,000. We also run a few different HR communities too, and we've actually got the British Training Awards, which is opening March 3rd, completely free to take part. So if you've got any L&D initiatives that you'd like to kind of raise the profile of and get recognised for, I would encourage you to take part in that. You can just search British Training Awards on Google to find that. But yeah, cool. Really good to meet you.
Great, thank you, Nate. Grace, if you wouldn't mind just going to the next slide. Perfect. This is we're quite new to GoToWebinar, so for any of you who haven't used it before, there's a box there for you to put any questions that you have for the panel as we go throughout the session, and we will try to answer as many as we can at intervals or at the end of the webinar, depending on how things go. And whether you're using the web version or the desktop version, you can navigate to relevant part of the app to ask these questions. Throughout today's webinar, we'll also be asking some polls. You'll be presented with some options on the screen to choose from, and we do encourage you to participate if you can. The poll results will then be presented to you on the screen. So then just moving on to today's agenda. So as workplace dynamics evolve, understanding and meeting employee expectations is essential to building thriving, future-ready organisations. So Kingswood Group are excited to partner with New Possible today to bring you this insightful webinar, exploring the key findings from the What Workers Want 2025 report. So during the session, we'll be looking at the latest trends shaping employee satisfaction, and from the demand to flexibility in the workplace and the growing importance of career growth. And you will learn how to align your HR strategies with these priorities to attract and retain top talent in 2025 and beyond. And then at the end, we're finished with an opportunity to have your questions answered. So now going to hand over to Nate for him to begin his presentation.
Brilliant, cool. Thank you, Laura. I'm just going to share my screen, everyone. So there we go. Cool. Can you see that?
I can see that. Perfect.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Yeah, so what we'll do is a little bit of background just about what Workers Want, so 2025. So we launched the first What Workers Want in 2021, just alongside New Possible. Around 75% of the questions, they remain the same year on year so that we can track trends, and I'll highlight some of those differences as we go through the slides today. The most recent survey, which is the basis of today's insights, that took place in December, and we captured responses from over 2,000 employees across 25 sectors. And you may have already seen some of our insights too, featured in a few publications as well. There's a selection of some of the headlines there, which we'll deep dive into in a bit more detail in a moment. Cool. So before we look at why employees stay or leave, I just wanted to give a bit of background about some of the questions we ask and also how we interpret them too. So we ask 14 questions in total. The key questions though are: what do you like most about your job? What do you like least about your job? And how likely are you to look for a new job in the next 12 months? So responses to all these free text questions, they go into our data model. It categorizes what employees are talking about into those 20 themes that you can see there. What we then do is those themes are then associated with the employee's likelihood to leave. So how likely they say they're going to look for that new job in the next 12 months. And then from that, we can identify the key drivers behind retention too. All right, so before we reveal why employees stay or leave, we're going to jump into this poll now. If you can have a little guess about what the top reason is you think employees jump ship. Okay.
79%
Cool.
voted now. I think we're almost there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah. So it looks like poor leadership, unhealthy culture, 53%. So yeah, that absolutely is the top reason why people leave. So if you go jump onto that now, so poor leadership and culture. Interestingly, it looked like colleagues was quite low on there, but that's a really big theme too. It's actually the top reason why people say they're likely to stick around. Because that friendships at work, they can be powerful in creating that sense of belonging, but equally poor colleague relationships too. There you can see that's the third reason why employees leave. But yeah, absolutely, you guessed it right. So leadership and culture, top reasons people leave. So if we're going to focus on culture in a little bit more detail, and it's not only a top reason why employees say they're likely to leave, but it's also a reason why they say they're likely to stay too. So a healthy culture can mean different things to different organizations and sectors. People most often describe a healthy culture as one that's caring, fair, supportive. And when they were talking about an unhealthy culture, greedy, challenging, toxic, you can see that used. There's some really not so nice words there. You can see corrupt, sneaky, for example. Often a lot of these words relate to people feeling undervalued too. And what we found is an unhealthy culture is often linked to poor managers or management and leadership as well. And a key takeaway I'd suggest is to continue investing in leadership development. What our data shows is that the return on investment of that, it could be huge in terms of reducing attrition. You invest in leaders, you're going to see that poor leadership go down, and also you should also see that culture improve too. Now, you'll notice that unhealthy cultures, they have a much stronger impact on retention than a healthy culture. And it's because a healthy culture is seen as a hygiene factor, so it's expected. And when those expectations aren't met, people are very, very likely to jump ship. Okay, so moving on, so flexibility, we can see that was another significant theme, and I noticed in the poll too, quite a few were pulling out their work-life balance. So flexibility, very significant theme, and we define flexibility as a way of working that suits an employee's needs. So for example, having flexible start and finish times, or working from home. And it's a theme that's gathering momentum too. So 59% of employees without flexibility plan to leave within the next 12 months. And that's up from 50% the year before. So that's 59%. And this is at a time where more employers are rowing back on the flexibility they've offered. And what's the result? Well, the Guardian, they recently reported that 2/3 of recruiters have seen a surge in applicants after being told to work 5 days a week in the office. And this presents employers with a huge opportunity, I think, to attract top talent. If you can offer meaningful flexibility, your employee value proposition is going to increasingly stand out. Now we're going to look at a couple more themes that come through. Specifically, there was a frequent frustration around a lack of resources and also poor work-life balance too. And what's clear is that many people are feeling overworked. They're saying they're feeling the pressure, long hours. You know, this is in the context, I guess, of a lot of firms freezing hiring, some firms making people redundant. Some sectors, they're also struggling to hire people. And this all means more work having to be done by fewer people. And this is having a very real effect on well-being too, and that risk of burnout. In fact, over half of people who talked about a lack of resources and work-life balance, they told us that their well-being had declined in the past year. And that compares to 30% overall. And the biggest declines we saw in well-being were seen across transport and logistics, IT, sales, and retail. Now, pay dissatisfaction was also a top reason why people leave, although not as big a deal as a lot of people kind of expect. A lot of people are still feeling the effects of the rising cost of living. And on average, employees view a 7% pay increase as fair in 2025. So it still stubbornly remains quite high, only down 1% versus 2024. They were highest in sectors that had lower average wages. So hospitality, retail, healthcare, that's where the pay expectations were highest. Now, the minimum wage increase may well meet some of this demand, but it does place a lot of pressures on sectors, on companies that are already being disproportionately affected by changes to national insurance. And all this in the context of an economy that is moving quite sluggishly as well. Now, good benefits was also a key reason why people stay. But which benefit do employees say they value most? And we're going to jump onto our next poll now, give you around 20-30 seconds to answer that.
Just while we're waiting, Nate, so we've had a question in the box from Rachel just asking, out of interest, how did you get your respondents for the survey?
Yeah, so we work with a couple of survey companies, and we just make sure, I guess, the population is representative. And yeah, we ran that window in December, so people incentivized to take part in that. What I direct afterwards, I've shared the link to What Workers Want findings, and on there you can read a bit more about the methodology as well. But yeah, that's a bit about it. And what we'll do in a minute too, we'll look into a bit around the sector analysis and also the demographics that took part too. So we'll break it up by that as well.
Lovely. Thanks, Nate.
Okay, cool. So looking at the poll, so flexible working, yeah, right at the top there, 94% have selected that, work from home, flexible hours. So again, that's that's exactly what the respondents were saying. So I'll just switch my screen again. Great. So yeah, so flexible hours, that ability to work from home or holiday, right on the top there. And when we actually look at that age segmentation too, we find that younger workers, they're much more interested in social events. While demand for flexible hours, that peaked among those at age 35 to 44. We'll jump into that in a bit more detail on the next one. We also found that older workers, so 65 plus, they're less inclined to want to work from home. So for them, in-person interaction seems to be a bigger pull. And keeping on that theme of age, so 35 to 44-year-olds, they're most likely to look for a job over the next 12 months. Pay and workload, so when we looked at that feedback, pay and workload was with some of the most significant themes behind that. Younger workers, they tend to place more value on colleague relationships, while older workers, they were more likely to want a job that's interesting and meaningful. It's interesting, a few years ago, certainly just as we were leaving the pandemic, it was Gen Z that were kind of leading the Great Resignation there, but that's rowed back now. You can see that's 33%, and it's that 35 to 44-year-old demographic that's really kind of pulling that likelihood to leave up. And then when we look at sectors, so engineering, manufacturing, charities, they report some of the highest satisfaction levels this year. Healthcare, retail, transport and logistics, they were ranking at the lower end. Retail is one that was scoring quite low last year too. It also registers the highest likelihood of turnover, the biggest frustrations for them being around workload, leadership and pay. Cool. We also saw a significant shift in IT too. So that was previously the most satisfied sector last year. We're seeing growing dissatisfaction as frustrations around pay, work-life balance, so as tech skill shortages, increasing demands around AI and cybersecurity, likely contributing to that. The overall likelihood to leave versus last year increased to 39%, so that's a 6% jump on the previous year, which means we've actually seen kind of falls in employee stickiness across most sectors. All right, that's cool. So that's it from me. Before I hand over back to Laura and Grace at Kingswood, there's a couple of things. So you can discover a link to the full findings in the chat. What we're also able to do is offer you the chance to run our MP360 survey at no cost. So there's some overlap with MP360 and some of the questions that we ask in What Workers Want. So this uses some of the questions from our What Workers Want research, and it looks across 7 themes, including satisfaction, well-being, and culture. What we'll do is, if it is something you'd like to take part in, we'll provide you with a branded survey link, so it'll feature your logo at the top. And when your survey closes, you'll also receive a free summary report too. So we'll pick out some of the themes that came up. Have a word cloud. One of our favourite questions is, how would you describe the organisation as a place to work? And you'll find a distinct personality comes out for your company. If that sounds interesting, please let us know via the next poll, which we'll keep open for a few seconds.
I found it really interesting what you said, what came out about how age demographics impact how people feel about, you know, what they value most in an organisation, and whether they're more likely to move on. Because I think in my own personal experiences, how my life has changed, you know, in the last 5 years when I had my daughter, and how priorities are completely different. So I think it's a really important factor to consider, those age demographics.
Mm. Okay, cool. I will, what I'll do, I'll stop sharing the screen.
I'll start sharing mine again.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
There we are.
So yes, thank you, Grace. So do we have any more questions for Nate before I start talking again? Don't know if there's anything new come through, Grace.
There's nothing else in the box as of
Okay,
yet.
no worries. Okay, then yeah, we can move on then. When you're ready, Grace. Move on to my bit. Next slide. Perfect. Thank you very much. Great. So yeah, thank you so much, Nate. Hopefully everyone will agree that that was a really insightful presentation with lots of interesting statistics. Definite food for thought. So I was lucky enough to review the report ahead of today's session, and personally there were some surprises for me, but some not so surprising, like responses to salary still being a key factor for people staying. All looking for new roles. So I've put together some key considerations of my own and reflected on what you've mentioned today. So 73% of respondents prioritise workplace culture and leadership that listens. 65% say that career development paths would make them stay in a job. So this is something that I can relate to from previous experience. I stayed with my first employer for over 10 years. And mainly because they kept investing in my development. So it's definitely a great way to retain an employee instead of a pay rise, although both are welcome. As they develop, you benefit from their new skills and engagement. 78% said that hybrid working enhances work-life balance, but needs structured policies. And so it's important to have a solid hybrid policy in place that sets boundaries, tells employees what they should do if they are unwell, sets rules around breaks. We'll talk more about flexible working in the next slide, but having a hybrid policy is really important if you do offer hybrid working, and something that we can help you with at Kingswood Group. And finally, critical retention factors still include compensation, which is no surprise, but employees also consider wellbeing benefits and diversity and inclusion as important reasons to stay in a job. So if we could just move on to flexibility, benefits and wellbeing. So respondents said that flexibility in working hours and location were key to retention. Employees now expect multiple flexible working options and new possible defined flexibility is a way of working that suits an employee's needs. So for example, this could be having flexible start and finish times. And as Nate discussed in his presentation, 59% of employees without a flexibility plan to leave in the next 12 months. The reality of this is that, like Nate said, there are plenty of employers out there. And if you're offering flexibility, it's a way to attract talent. So flexibility is definitely key. And what was once a rare benefit is now an expectation to employees. What can businesses do? Make sure your hybrid working policies are fair and structured. Consider other flexible working models in addition to hybrid or remote working, like job shares, offering flexibility to start and finish times or operating core hours. Before 2020, remote working was not as common as it is today. I think we all remember when COVID hit, and I remember where I was working at the time, we all just had computers and no one had a laptop. So everyone had to adapt overnight. Since then we've come a long way and businesses are generally more accommodating with flexible working. And a few things to note: since legislation changes in 2024, where flexible working became a day one right, employees no longer have to give justification for flexible working requests. So employees no longer need to explain how their proposed flexible working arrangement might impact the business or suggest ways to mitigate potential issues. Employers can no longer reject a flexible working request outright, and if an employer cannot fully accommodate their request, they must first consult with the employee to discuss the request and explore alternatives. No surprises that compensation remains crucial to retention. 69% would leave for better pay with the economic crisis. I think this is completely understandable. We all have bills to pay at the end of the day. Employees cannot be expected to be loyal forever if they're not being paid fairly. So we advise annual salary benchmarking activities to improve pay transparency. And employees now consider holistic benefits, including mental health, well-being and financial support to be important. So you could consider introducing an EAP, like an employee assistance program, which we can help you with at Kingswood, or wellness programs and financial education. And extra holiday also came out on top as the list of most valued benefits. Most organisations, some organisations can operate holiday purchase schemes where you can sacrifice some of your salary to purchase additional leave, so that's something you can consider. And I think ultimately what the most important thing to do though is when reviewing benefits is to talk to employees first. So consider an engagement survey provider like New Possible. Ask your workforce what benefits they want, because whilst this report says employees value extra holiday, they may want something completely different. So it's always important to consider your employees. So if we can move to the next slide, engagement, culture and retention. And so employee expectations are changing, and it's no longer enough to pay them to do the work. If you want to retain talent, you'll need to be focusing on how to engage the workforce. Recognition, purpose and transparent communication was key to engagement from the respondents in this survey. So employees want more say in decisions that impact them. How can this be built into your HR strategies? Consider implementing regular surveys and, more importantly, act on the feedback. It's all well and good doing these surveys, but if there's no actions that come out of it, employees they become disengaged. Foster a safe and inclusive culture. Truly listen to employees and not only let them know, but make them feel that their voice matters. A business is not a business without its people. To give employees purpose and transparency, develop structured career pathways with clear progression routes. Find out what their career goals are and let them know what they have to do to get there. Don't wait to start succession planning, as you never know what's around the corner. Employees don't just want salary enhancements to feel rewarded, they want recognition that often comes at no cost at all. So go back to basics. Send thank you letters or thank you cards, and in some industries, Employee of the Month works really well, or long service awards are well received. You can also invest in training and development, which is something I'm going to talk about on the next slide. So diversity, equity and inclusion should be embedded in company culture. This is not something that can happen overnight, as I hopefully you all appreciate, and often needs to be pushed from the top down. You should think about DEI policy, but remember that there's more to it than just words on a piece of paper. So you should consider how to proactively manage your people and business activities. A starting point here could be to train your managers and workforce on unconscious bias and DEI awareness, and consider your recruitment practices and succession planning. Look at whether they're inclusive. And with regards to skills development, it's so important to the ongoing success of your business to support internal career progression and development, as we said in previous slides. So investing in learning development is just so valuable, and ultimately career stagnation will lead to disengagement for most. So in the survey, 72% of respondents said they value learning opportunities. And if you don't have a budget for training, consider lower cost activities like mentoring. So, I mean, that's mainly it from me on those slides. And I don't know if anyone's got any questions that they want to ask. Silence.
I'll keep them on the chat box. Well, the question box.
Or if you've got any questions for Nate. I think we did have a couple of, we had a couple of questions of our own for you, Nate, actually. Let me just go back to those. So, so do you have any evidence on how flexibility impacts productivity? Something you were talking about on your slides.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's what, so many people are trying to figure that out, like what is that impact of flexibility on productivity? But one of the questions we did ask, although we can't answer that one directly, one of the questions we did ask was around risk of redundancy. And what we found is that organizations offering flexibility, people were much less likely to say, that they felt they were at risk of redundancy. So is that because firms with flexibility, offering flexibility, are generally more successful? Maybe it's because firms that aren't doing very well, they're kind of mandating that return to the office. It's probably a combination of both factors there. But what I do think is that flexible organisations that offer flexibility, that requires a certain culture, a culture of trust. It requires effective leadership, and it's probably not too far a jump to say that probably firms that are offering flexibility generally are more likely to be flexible. But yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I know there's a lot of data that's kind of coming out now. A few firms that have been doing 4-day working week and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, we were talking about 4-day working week actually yesterday, just amongst the team, weren't we? Great to hear. Yeah, we'd like that. Great. So I'm just gonna, just while we're waiting for any more questions to come through, I'm just gonna talk about
There
our
is just a
next.
quick one in the chat, so I'll just jump
go
in.
on,
So
yeah.
Scott has just asked, how should companies push back against politicians and the media who do not value DEI and keep pushing a hard right agenda instead? It's scarily providing popular in wider society.
Just-
It's a good question.
And it's interesting because you're seeing some companies. I think it was, I think I saw, and Accenture a week ago, a couple of weeks ago, they've rode back a little bit on their DEI policies, and there's other kind of companies that are doing that too, especially since I guess the Trump administration's come in. But I think people notice that, and certain communities and talented people are noticing that. And I think that's one thing, if you can maintain that policy and do what you can around DEI, similar to like flexibility, you stand out as an organization. And I think that can really just help enhance your employee value proposition. So yeah, I think push back just by doing it. People vote with their feet, and I think it's just another way that you can get some really fantastic talent.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you. There's
Yeah,
no
so
other
just
questions so far, but shall we move on to the next?
yeah, we just move on just to tell you about our, just while we're waiting for any more questions to come in. So our next webinar, which is on the 20th of March. So that's available for you to register now. So if you enjoyed today's webinar, hopefully you'll join us again. So this will be talking about HR trends for 2025, and how the UK workplace is evolving rapidly with all the new employment legislation and proposals. So yeah, the UK labour market is more competitive than ever, as you know, and employee expectations are shifting fast, as we discussed in this presentation. This webinar will help you stay ahead, navigate legal changes, and embrace trends that benefit your business. So this webinar will be useful for any business owners, directors, and HR professionals who want to future-proof their people strategies and stay compliant. So yeah, please do sign up and join us on the 20th of March if you're interested in that. And then great, and also just to tell you about a free HR benchmarking assessment that we have that you can download from our website. So completely free, and if you're considering HR support but not sure if you need it, you can try this out. It works just like a HR compliance health check. You'll be given a series of questions to answer, and then a tailored report will be delivered to your inbox and evaluate 16 key areas. And I'll just tell you a bit as well about some of our additional HR services. So we can also offer HR project management, as well as retained HR services, team culture and personality profiling. So we're certified everything DISC practitioners at Kingswood Group. We can support with wellbeing through different methods of delivery and training. On training, we partner with an e-learning provider that we can help you with, and we can also deliver our own in-person training sessions on various different HR topics. If you're looking for an employee assistance program, please let us know. We can put you in touch with a provider for that. and HR management system. So we partner with Breathe. So anyone who's used Breathe before or heard of Breathe, we can arrange a demo for more information. It's a streamlined, user-friendly system to manage all your HR processes like sickness, holiday, reporting. So that's it from us. I think there was just one other question actually that we had for you, Nate. So I'll ask that now before we end the session. So are there any sectors where you saw a significant shift in job satisfaction versus last year?
Yeah, so one of them I mentioned there was IT specifically. That's one where we saw growing dissatisfaction in particular. But in general, really, because we saw that 39% likelihood to leave versus 33% last year, we saw that reduction in almost all sectors. Interestingly, law, we didn't really see that, and that was a sector that was particularly high in terms of the level of flexibility that was offered respondents. They overwhelmingly said that these law firms that they're working for offer flexibility, and I think that was a factor in that. But yeah, probably IT was the most interesting sector, but overall across all the sectors, we did see a tick up in that overall likelihood to leave. And Rachel, I don't know if I've just answered your question in there too. I saw about that graphic, that word cloud. So that's all accessible on the findings page. I've just shared that in the chat there, but you'll be able to get all the graphics. Please feel free to kind of copy and use them in any presentations or anything like that. And if you do have any other questions too off the back of it, please do email me, nate@newpossible.io. Thank you.
Great. Is that it from all the questions now? There's nothing else outstanding, is there, Grace?
Yeah, nothing else in there at the moment.
Okay. Oh, something else popped up, or is that in there? No. Great. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for attending today. Thank you so much, Nate, for joining us and for sharing those really interesting insights into the report. And we hope to see some of you on our next webinar soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Oh,
bye.
Oh,
I think we have a
yeah. Oh, yeah. No.